here at 7:02. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Peter Thomas.
Here.
Jim Jinks. Here. Dina Allard. Here. John Malone. Here. Don Walsh. Here. David Velver. Here. Fiona Pearson. Here. Tricia Kramer. Here. And Greg Wolf. Here. Everyone's present.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we have 3 items on the agenda tonight. The adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 general fund operating budget, adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 Water Pollution Control Department Fund operating budget, as well as the adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 Community Pool Fund operating budget. We'll start with the adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 General Fund operating budget. Budget Chair Jinks, if you would, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the Town Council approves a resolution number 042225-1. Be it resolved, the Cheshire Town Council appropriates the following amounts for the Town of Cheshire General Fund operating budget for fiscal year 2025-2026. General Government, $40,733,462. Debt Service, $11,542,771. Contingency, $100,000. Capital non-recurring, $500,000. Be it resolved, the Cheshire Town Council appropriates the amount of $124,314 for the Board of Education budget. Be it further resolved, the sum of all revenues, transfers from other funds, and allocation of general fund equity for the fiscal year 2025-26 Town of Cheshire General Fund operating budget will be in the amount of $146,547. And be it further resolved, the tax rate be set at 29.74 mils, which will generate $116,984,220 at the collection rate of 99.2% for fiscal year 2025-2026 for real and personal property and motor vehicles. That the tax payments for motor vehicles and personal property shall be due and payable in one payment on July 1st, 2025. That the real estate tax payment shall be paid in 2 equal installments, with the first payment due on July 1st, 2025, and the second payment due on January 1st, 2026. And that pursuant to Section 12-144 of the Connecticut General Statutes, as amended, that any real estate tax bill on the 2024 grand list in an amount not in excess of $100 shall be due and payable in a single installment on July 1st, 2025. And that pursuant to Sections 12-142 and 12-146 of the Connecticut General Statutes, as amended, the last date for payment of taxes due July 1st, 2025 will be August 1st, 2025. Therefore, payment of taxes due July 1st, 2025, which are received after August 1st, 2025, will be assessed interest calculated from the original due date of July 1st, 2025. The last date for payment of taxes due January 1st, 2026 will be February 2nd, 2026. Payment of taxes due January 1st, 2026, which are received after February 2nd, 2026, will be assessed interest calculated from the due date of January 1st, 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Jinks. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Allard, thank you. Mr. Jinks, I'll turn it back to you for the beginning of discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to say thank you to Mayor Talbot, my fellow councilors, Budget Committee members Fiona Pearson and John Malone, Town Manager Sean Kimball, Director of Finance Jim Jascott, all the town department heads, Superintendent Jeff Solon, and our COO Vin Massiana, who I see is here tonight, and our Board of Ed members and President as well. As we've been saying throughout this process, this has been a very difficult budget due to the loss of state funds, the end of the Biden Rescue Plan funds, flat grand list growth, a rapidly growing school district, higher contractual costs, higher minimum wage costs, a reduction in state pilot and ECS funding again, and significantly higher debt service demands due to the construction of 2 new elementary schools. This year has been a perfect storm for the town budget. Before even factoring in the higher debt service demands, the Board of Ed budget and the town budget increase, we were in a $4.7 million hole relative to last year. $900,000 less in state pilot and education cost-sharing funding, $500,000 in state MRSA funding gone, $1 million in motor vehicle tax cap grant gone, $1.3 million in Biden Rescue Plan funds gone, and $1 million less in general fund equity. These losses of revenue would alone account for approximately a 1.2 mill rate increase. The Board of Ed approved budget increase request was 7%, or $6.2 million. The debt service increase, almost entirely due to the construction of the referendum improved elementary schools, is $2.6 million. It's a 0.7 mil increase all by itself. The town side requested budget increase was $1.5 million. Total all this up, and we started with a $15 million gap between revenues and expenditures, the most severe situation any town council has had to face. The town and schools operate efficiently. The vast majority of costs are for wages and benefits on the school side in particular. Medical benefit costs are persistently squeezing out funding for teachers, paraeducators, instructional supplies, and programming. This is a growing problem, and it's unsustainable. Unless the state increases ECS funding for Cheshire, we'll continue to have to use local property tax increases and cuts to services to bridge the gap, meaning more money for less services, the worst of both worlds. On the town side, we're cutting to the point that existing town services shouldn't be impacted that much, but we are cutting to the point that we're way beyond the fat and muscle. Deeper cuts could mean we're scraping into the bone. In terms of staff, we cut 2 seasonal public work maintainers, 1 unfilled position in library, a part-time records clerk position, and a part-time accounts payable position. We also cut the budgets for some volunteer boards and commissions, cut the fireworks of the fall festival, holiday reception for town volunteers, reduced the arts place supplies budget, and have had to increase fees from the recreation department and the town pool. We also decided to cut the public works request to fund a once-a-month bulky waste drop-off event at the town dump site. In a year when the schools are having to cut teacher positions, it's not the time to launch a new service for town residents. The town's budget request was a 3.9% increase through expenditure cuts and some revenue adjustments, including $2 million from our rainy day fund. We reduced the town's requested increase down to 1.93%. Given that average wage increases are about 3%, the town's budget increase isn't even keeping up with wage increases. Needless to say, this isn't sustainable. On the Board of Ed side, their approved budget back in January included a 7% increase over the fiscal year 2025 budget. The cost drivers are the rapidly growing student population, higher minimum wage, medical benefits cost, a transportation cost increase, and a contractual wage increase over 3.5%. After discussions with the council and recognizing that what we're facing this year, the schools identified over $2 million of expenditure decreases. In an effort to find some common ground in the council and further reduce the impact on taxpayers, we've asked for an additional $360,000 worth of reductions. We're confident the BOE will do their best to manage this decrease and still provide students the support they need. Overall, the reduced BOE budget increased from 7% down to 4%. That's a 43% decrease in their initial ask. At 4%, their budget increase is barely keeping up with contractual wage increases. As I said earlier, medical benefits are crowding out the schooling part of our schools. Without more support from the state, we'll be faced with having to decide what services we can sustainably provide for our residents going forward. At the rate we're going, someday Cheshire may be a school system with police and fire departments attached. We will simply not be able to continue to offer trash collection, long library hours, summer camps, senior transportation, youth counseling services, and so much of what makes our citizens appreciate living in Cheshire. That is, the town will not be able to provide these services unless taxpayers of Cheshire continue to support these services. While the mill rate increase isn't where I'd prefer it to be, I wish it could be lower. It was always going to be difficult to please everyone this year. But the debt service on the schools is a 0.7% mill increase all by itself. Prior to last year's mill rate reduction of 7.63 mils, the previous 3 years averaged a 0.62 mill rate increase. But those years, the schools were not growing like they're growing now. We had a lot more help from the state and federal funds. Frankly, those were relatively frothy years for the town budget. This year and last year were much more challenging for the reasons already given, but despite the challenges, for 2 consecutive years, we've reduced the percent increase of the budget. Fiscal year 25, it was 5.23% increase versus 5.93% the year before, and this year the budget increase is down to 4.32%. It's clear we're holding the line on cost increases without really any outside help, especially this year. But I know most people will certainly mainly care about the mill rate increase and the increase of their taxes. We were all aware of the impact throughout this process. The property tax increase for a taxpayer with average home and vehicle property values will be about a $673 increase. Given that roughly $450 of this is due to the debt service on the schools, the average tax increase, net the debt service for the schools, amounts to an increase of approximately $223 or $18.58 per month. This is a $223 annual increase for all the quality services the town and schools provide, and will still be among the towns with lower mill rates, and far lower than towns we compete with for residents, like Glastonbury, Simsbury, Middlebury, North Haven, Woodbridge. Arts Place, with over 1,200 students and 141 arts classes and over $125,000 in revenue, cost Cheshire $9.49 per capita. The building department, with over 7,500 inspections performed, 85% within 24 hours of the request, and 3,000 permits issued, costs $15 per capita. Our volunteer fire department, with 1,024 responses, that's 2.8 per day, and their ability to have an effective firefighting force on scene within 15 minutes, 96% of the time, costs $50 per capita. Human Services, with over 1,850 clinical contact hours, 2,200 youth program participants, 1,126 food vouchers distributed, and 10,500 rides provided for seniors, costs $33.10 per capita. Our library, with over 166,000 visits, 9,000 cardholders, over 265,000 borrows of physical materials, over 500 library programs held with over 17,000 participants, costs Cheshire $48 per capita. Our police department, with over 35,000 total incidents, an average of 729 per officer, costs us $191 per capita. Public Works, with 560 work requests from the public, nearly 8,500 tons of solid waste collected, 18 playing fields lined and maintained, 200,000 square feet of public buildings to maintain, 304 lane miles of street swept, 800 catch basins maintained, and hundreds of trees removed, cost Cheshire $206 per capita. Our recreation department, with over 500 programs offered, 5,400 program participants, 13,000 special event attendees, 725 mixed-field passes sold, and 147 pavilion rentals, cost Cheshire $36 per capita. Our town clerk, the last one, with over 2,300 licenses issued, 3,800 land records recorded, and over 610,000 land conveyance taxes collected, costs us $7.34 per capita. We have a lot to be proud of in Cheshire. Our recent ranking of best places to live had Cheshire at number 11 in Connecticut, number 2 in New Haven County, actually. People move here for the schools, but they stay here because of everything else we have to offer, and because this is a safe, well-run town and tremendous value for the taxpayer. The proof is in all the residential, commercial development in town, businesses investing in our town, and increasing demand for and value of our property. Nevertheless, I am concerned about the rising taxes on our fixed and lower income taxpayers. As I've said before, we need to investigate ways to alleviate more of the burden from our older residents with lower incomes. This past year, the town's tax burden reduction programs resulted in over $500,000 in tax savings to hundreds of households. It's possible we could do more, but we also need to be careful not to shift too much of the tax burden on the young people and families. Raising a family is more costly than ever. I am supporting this budget as it continues to support all of our great services and our high-performing schools at a value to the taxpayer that simply can't be matched anywhere in Connecticut. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to, if I could, make an amendment to the proposed budget. I would like to modify the education line by reducing the line by $640,000. And it's additionally to reduce the pool subsidy by $25,000. Utilize $25,000 from the NEF fund, and then utilize those $50,000 to reinstate the bulky waste drop-off program.
Second it.
Which I believe would result in a reduction in the mill rate to 29.58, if that is correct?
We have a amendment and a second discussion. Mr. Vellenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The reason I'm proposing this amendment is we need to continue to cut the budget. Although the proposed budget is a good start, especially from where we started, we need to continue to work on getting the taxes as low as possible. We need to live within our means. We need to tighten our belt. Everyone is tightening their belts when it comes to things. For us, we get to go to the taxpayers and say, pony up, give us more money. Taxpayers don't have any other place to go if we say pay more money. They have to pay more money, and that means they're not going to spend it on other things, or they're going to have to do it less for their children or for themselves. So it's important that we try to make our budget as tight as possible, because as people tighten their belts, we need to tighten our belt. I believe this change is a good additional cut. Is it perfect? No. Is it not even as far as I might like to bring our budget in line with what I feel is a more reasonable tax increase? But it's an additional cut that is a good measured first step. Do we know exactly what that's going to come from this? No. The Board of Education is going to have to sharpen their pencils and really make some hard decisions to see what is important. There will be threats of cuts important programs or teachers, but there are other places to start before that. The Board of Education will be able to maintain the services as they have in the past. Over the past years, the state and our legislative delegation has really started to shortchange Cheshire and not properly provide a proper level of ECS and pilot funding. And I hope that this year it will change and more revenue will be forthcoming. I think we're all hopeful of that. In addition to further reducing the budget, we think it's important that we provide the residents of Cheshire with some form of bulky waste removal. The prior Republican councils had worked hard to bring back bulky waste pickup twice over the past 4 years in an effort to provide that service, which is something that people really love in this town. We recognize the cost of that as a bulky waste pickup is going to be cost prohibitive this year, but we think it's important that we have at least the opportunity for people to be able to get rid of their bulky waste items, even if that means they may have to take it to the landfill. I recognize that may mean it's not as available to everybody as the bulky waste pickup, but at least it will be available throughout the year on weekends for people who can take advantage of it. For the cost of $50,000, we can do that, and we would like to bring that bulky waste drop-off back.
Thank you, Mr. Velaber. Further discussion? Mr. Walsh.
I want to agree with what Mr. Velaber said. Nobody's going to be happy with this budget, no matter what it is. Whatever is voted on tonight, nobody's going to be happy. But I think this is an attempt for us to try to decrease the average cost to each taxpayer by a little and bring back one service that I think is highly important to many people in this town, as we have heard numerous times. So, you know, I would agree and I would support this amendment to the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Further?
Just a quick,
Mr. Velaber.
Is there any way, you want to see what that does? I mean, from what I understand from our conversation, I believe, what would that do to the percentage rate and the reduction in taxpayer?
Sure. So I could put it up on the screen, but if I can also just maybe narrate it first, and we can see if we want to go further. But previously, as mentioned before, the average impact for the taxpayer of the budget as originally proposed tonight, including the average vehicle and average home with 2 average vehicles, was $673 per year, or 7.58% increase. And this would lower that to $621 per year, or a 7% increase. And the mill rate would be 29.58, which I think you said earlier.
Great, thank you very much. So it drops the percentage increase to below 7% and would save the average taxpayer about $55, correct?
Drops it to almost exactly 7%, and yes.
$52, right?
$52.
$52.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Further? Mr. Mylone.
Thank you, Peter. I also would like to support this amendment to the budget. But first of all, I want to thank my colleagues on the hard work that we've done this year. I believe this amendment would be helpful. I know it's more burden on our Board of Education, but I believe that there are opportunities to minimize that impact on our students. I hope there are, and we'll ask our board and our staff to do that. It has been a difficult year from a budget perspective. For the several years I've been on the council, I found this the most difficult. It's very hard to be up here to make the decisions that impact our residents. It's been satisfying, as it has been in the past, to hear from firsthand from our department heads and our division leads, the care they give to this community and the efforts they put forth and the consideration of the impact of their efforts and their costs on our community comes out every year at every one of our departments. It's a satisfying process to hear them and to see their consideration. I'm also personally grateful to our town manager, Sean Kimball, our assistant town manager, Andrew Martinelli, and our finance director, Jim Jascott, for their care and consideration, and for all the extraordinary efforts they did this year to minimize the amount of increase for our town budget. I think it was unbelievable what they came up with. They continued to work hard, even though they offered us a very, I thought, modest increase in budget, but they continued to work hard to help us get it as low as possible. I'm also grateful to our superintendent of schools, Jeff Solon, our assistant superintendent, Marlene Solano, and our district's chief operating officer, Vin Marciano. I know I've been tough on them, but I sincerely believe that they are hardworking and considerate in their goal to provide the highest quality education to our students, have been both responsive and flexible, very flexible during this budget process. I'm hopeful this revised budget will find support by the entire council. I think it is a modification that helps us move our taxes in the right direction, and I believe that it is a reasonable compromise. I appreciated Jim's presentation. I thought it was very thoughtful and very thorough, and a lot of facts in there. They were very helpful. I don't agree with his pessimism regarding our future. I think these are just a couple of tough years we're going to go through from a budget perspective, with some continued grand list growth and some other maybe some future help from the state. I believe that we will get through this, and the future of Cheshire is very, very positive, and I'm very optimistic. I'd like to say that I don't believe the budget issues we're facing here have anything to do at this point with the federal government. I think that the loss of the ARPA funds, we had about almost $9 million in ARPA funds given to us through the state of Connecticut. I think we used those thoughtfully and carefully. We knew they weren't going to be here this year, and there were no other loss of federal funds that I'm aware of. I would like to mention, though, with the ARPA funds, I'm still expressed disappointment with our legislature, our state legislature. I mean, the state of Connecticut received, I think, about $12 billion in ARPA funds, $1.5 billion distributed to Connecticut cities and towns. We got under $9 million. I mean, I would have liked to see the state legislature do more for some of our communities such as Cheshire. I know there's other needs in the state, but we have needs as well. And I also don't believe, and there's been discussion of this in the past, that actions of past councils have anything to do with the situation we're in. I've only served on the council for 3 years, but I'm grateful to past councils, both Democrat and Republican-led, that they've kept our taxes at a reasonable level. I've never sensed in the past a need for services that were not provided. I think there's been a reasonable balance provided by those councils in terms of services and costs. Relative to our investment in schools, I think those have also been reasonable and represented a fair satisfaction of the needs of the community at those particular times. It's important to note between 1998 and 2015, our school population has decreased. I think this is the proper time to be building new schools, and yes, there's a tax implication associated with that, but I think that was done, I think, thoughtfully and through a town approval process, including a referendum. While we haven't built new schools in some time, there have been significant renovations in the past, and I think that was always nice to have new facilities. I think those decisions have reflected a reasonable balance between cost and need for our students. In closing, I'd like to thank each of my fellow council members for their efforts in this process. I know each of them take these decisions seriously and will act in a manner that they believe is in the best interest of our community. I hope our townspeople understand the difficulty of this process, particularly this year, and respect the individual decisions made by each of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milone. Mr. Jinks?
Yeah, can I just clarify? You're saying, sorry, thank you for those comments from each of you, but David, your amendment was $640,000 reduction, reinstatement of the drop-off, and you said, what, a $50,000 reduction in NEF funds? Is that what you're saying?
No, a 25,000 reduction in the pool subsidy
Oh,
and use of $25,000 of the NEF funds.
thanks.
You said $25,000 reduction in the subsidy. You mean a $25,000 increase in the fee structure to accommodate the... But if you take away the subsidy, that's less money to subsidize. Is so that's where you're going with you're lowering the subsidy by raising 25,000 in revenue instead of the subsidy? Okay, got it. Yes, and then 25,000 in NEF funds. Got it.
We were already counting on an increase in pool revenues from increasing the funds, right? So is an
That's
additional
correct,
20,
of 100,000, I think, and so this would be an additional 25,000.
an additional 25,000? I thought where we were was reasonable or, you know, reasonable to predict. Is 125,000?
So, David asked me the same question this morning when he was raising these. I think it is difficult to predict because, as we know, this is a portion of the town's services that is run more like a business. There's revenues and there's expenditures. One chunk of the revenues are the town's subsidy. But there is understandably a limit to how far you can raise the prices of something until the demand may fall too far to actually collect any. You'll have diminishing returns at some point. So I don't have a crystal ball for sure. I know that I talked to John Golick, who had a meeting earlier today with Sheila and the rest of his team as they, as charged by the council, we're going through to work with the Rec Commission on fee proposed changes, both on the recreation side and the pool side, which will be coming, I think, to a report to the council here probably in the coming days or weeks as to where they're landing. But yes, I think at the end of the day, I can't answer for sure that you would absolutely be able to guarantee that you can raise it. But if that was the charge the council put to them, they would do their best.
Further discussion, Mr. James? Anyone else? Ms. Allard?
I would be supportive of reducing the subsidy for the pool by $25,000. I would be in favor of trying to make the pool as self-sufficient as possible as the demand could carry. I would also be in favor of reinstating bulky waste if that was a balance and those funds actually worked out. I guess my question, a point of order, would be, is that something that can be decided outside of this budget motion? Could we use NEF funds to reintroduce bulky waste at some point later on in the future?
So, the NEF funds allow you to utilize them for, litter cleanup, litter drop-off, I think would be an understandable eligible use. So ultimately, as we've approved other uses of the NEF funds, whether it's the composting program in the schools or the Boulder Knoll effort, certainly it's within the council's purview to approve. Again, it would be a question of the money. We don't yet have a full balance of the full $50,000 to offer it. But that was, again, remember, throughout the year. If you wanted to offer it for part of the year, maybe in the fall or again in the spring, you don't have to decide that here at the budget. Probably I would recommend through the Sustainability Committee, you'd want to start with a recommendation or a proposal from Public Works to fund a series of those drop-offs. Just know that the trade-off is they wouldn't be monthly throughout the year, sort of predictable until we've announced what they are. And again, I'm speculating, but if that was the fall and the spring, there would probably be enough funds with either this upcoming expected funding from the NEF fund. Remember, we get funding twice a year, or between now and the next one, you would probably have enough money to fund at least, I would say maybe half a dozen drop-off events or something like that.
And then with respect to the pool subsidies, would we need to decide that now in order for the pool to establish their fee schedule, or can they establish a fee schedule that goes above and beyond what the reduction in subsidies that we initially discussed?
Yeah, so remember, when they're setting fees, we don't know what the result of that revenue will be till the end of next fiscal year. So at the end of the day, you're budgeting what you assume we will collect. I would, we do want to propose a balanced budget, so we don't want one that's eating into, and in past years, we've had some fund balance to lean back on. We don't have that now in the pool, so you'd be approving a sort of a deficit budget, which we wouldn't really want to do. You'd want to have a reasonable assumption that the revenues will, including the subsidy, the other non-subsidy revenues will balance against the expenditures proposed. But every year in every department, every budget line is not obviously 100% predictable, so you could have a vacancy that creates some salary savings. You could have things that happen in the year that mean you end up balanced anyway, whether you had more revenues or you just didn't have the expenditures you thought. Again, that holds true for our entire town budget, arguably, too. But, so I would, but again, I think where we are with the $100,000 increase as requested, that is the charge we put forward to them. I would probably say that that is what they're aiming towards. So I think the safest option is to say that that is, if you were approving a budget tonight, that's what you'd be sort of recommending. So
If we were to approve just the pool portion of Mr. Veliver's proposal, which is a $25,000 reduction in the pool subsidy, what kind of impact would that have on the mill rate?
Zero.
Not much, right?
Well, zero,
yeah.
because he's.
Well, if it's
you're-
used to
you're
offset
lowering
something else, then
subsidy,
it's just a
you're
wash,
using
right?
F funds. But then you're spending it on the reinstatement of bulky waste. So that portion of it is neutral as far as the mill rate or the average increase to the taxpayer. Where you're getting the lowering of the mill rate is the additional $640,000 cut to education.
Right, I understand. I would not be supportive of that cut without knowing exactly what services from the Board of Ed would be sacrificed as a result of that. But I really do appreciate the ideas with respect to the pool. I do appreciate the ideas with respect to bulky waste. I think that is a service that everybody enjoys, myself included. I'm happy to hear that we can potentially consider those ideas with our budget workshops. We got some great ideas from the community, and I really like what you're saying, Mr. Veliver, about trying to get those needs met as well. But I think that we can continue to strive towards those goals outside of this, especially since those two factors are not really going to impact the mill rate. So, and I would not be in support of an additional cut to the BOE. I feel like it's slender, uncomfortably slender as it is. On a personal note, I can, envision myself when my children were little in school, cutting the little boxes out of the boxes of cereal to save 10 cents for the school. And, notes coming home that, Miss Cindy's class is in short of supply, even though Miss Cindy spent $100 of her own funds to stock the room with markers and crayons, and please provide tissues and Kleenex boxes and things like that, I would not be in favor of further cuts to the BOE.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Walsh, and then Ms. Pearson.
I would just want to make one note. We did deduct $360,000 the other night without knowing how it's going to be used as well. So, it's fine, but like we've always said, it's up to the Board of Ed. We have some ideas that we suggest, but in the end, it is up to the Board of Ed to do it. And I know Adam and his crew can sharpen their pencils and find some way of getting it to where we need.
Ms. Pearson?
Yeah, I will just say first that, I would not support any cuts to the Board of Education. I already oppose the 360,000 cuts to the Board of Education. And we are ultimately responsible. It's not a matter of pointing fingers and say they figure it out. We are ultimately responsible for this decision in terms of what funds are available to our Board of Education. I just wanted to provide some additional information regarding the NEF funds. Just something to keep in mind, that if we were to divert any of those funds to bulky waste, that would mean fewer funds available for our school composting program, so that would ultimately be another cut to the Board of Education by default. So just something for us to consider regarding the NEF funds, that it would end up being an additional cut to the Board of Education. And according to state statute, our larger schools are going to be required to compost by the end of next year. So actually, Cheshire right now is ahead of the game and is being very proactive. And I met with a group of folks from across the state a couple of months ago with the Connecticut, it's the acronym, the CCSM, Connecticut Coalition of Strategic Materials Management. I knew I could get it. We were only one of a few communities that are already beginning to address what has been implemented according to state statute across the state, and schools are trying to sort out how they're going to address diverting our food waste, which will ultimately save money in our communities and across our state. If you've been reading the news, we're exporting our trash to Pennsylvania and Ohio right now, so our food diversion programs are a way of limiting the amount of waste that we are paying for when we are contracting out. So this is something that's very proactive and important. And bulky waste, absolutely an important service, and I would love to be able to bring that back. But as we're weighing what we need to do, those needs and those wants, I just know that if we were to divert those NEF funds, that would divert money from a need that we have in our community at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Further discussion? Mr. Velber.
Yep, just a couple things on the NEF funds. We recognize the importance of those funds and the use, and especially, the food diversionary program is very important. It's very important to Don and I, since, we were the ones who initiated that program. And so, because we thought it was very important. So we do recognize the importance of that program. But I also ironically, I just want to point out that even though we want to use it, potentially for this program, because it actually goes to dealing with waste, the council did agree to use $5,500 of that for composting. So that fund's already been tapped for other resources besides food composting. And so, so I think it's important to point that out, that it's not being kept aside simply for food composting. It's already, a chunk of it was already taken for other uses. So, but with that.
Can I clarify? That is food composting. So that $500,500 is for food composting. And so what they provided is a community compost station that will help our community to begin to divert waste as a way of addressing this larger trash problem. So it's not just our schools, but our residents can also benefit. So it is another, just to clarify, it is a composting program.
I'm just saying, when you talked about it, you were talking about it as taking it away from the food composting school program, and I just want to clarify that we are using it.
Right, it's not a cut in the Board of Ed.
It's a community, that particular 5,000 is not, but the other funds would be a cut. What you're proposing would be a cut in the Board of Ed.
Further? Ms. Kramer.
I just want to point out one of the frustrations of this process, and thank you, everybody, for every minute you've put into this. It's been grueling and truly a testament of what we were elected to do, I feel, for our volunteer positions. It's been a really important process that we've been through, and this is my second one, and it was more intense than the first, for sure, for a multitude of reasons. But I just wanted to address one of the main frustrations that I've learned, and learned very quickly, that the amendment that you're proposing, although it would be a fantastic amount of money taken from the education budget at this point, because we've asked them to cut so deep already, we haven't been assured that it won't be staff cuts. It is up to the Board of Ed. We have no say, but at this point, it's lean. There's no fat left on that budget. So what gets me is that with all of those cuts, not that $4 a month isn't a make or break amount on some bills. $4 a month, commuting, it could be, a bus ride to work that one month. But what it means when it's magnified into the Board of Ed's budget, it means loss of programs. It takes a little bit of what shine the Board of Ed is managing to do with what we've been able to give them. And I'm not saying that the $4 cuts don't add up, It's just when you look at what devastation this will bring to the remaining budget, $4 a month, it kind of takes the shine off of the amendment. It's truly a tough part of this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Anyone else?
Just one comment on that, and I understand it. We all understand that this is going to be tough, and it, Sean's already made a lot of cuts. We're already going to, we've got a lot of stuff on the town side, and there has already been a lot of give on from the Board of Ed side, so we appreciate that. I appreciate that very much. But one of the things I think it's also important is what was sort of brought up when we talked earlier with residents when they came to the to the podium, right? It was sort of a 50-50 balance between, maintain school and if you pass this budget, I may not be able to afford to live here. And so, yes, it's kind of a combination. It's a balancing between those two. And one of the other things I think that's very important, and we talked about it that night. I brought up is when we're making these budgets, every budget becomes the basis for the new budget. So when you don't make as many, when you don't go and make some of those cuts, it starts a new higher baseline for the next budget. And so, especially for the next few years, we really have to be, I think, very tough and make very difficult decisions to create as low a baseline as possible for the next budget. I don't think it's, obviously, we don't know exactly what it would be, but I don't have between my 8 years on the council and following these budgets over the past 20 years, we often hear these budgets, well, if you cut anything, the sky is going to fall. And, I think, we've shown that over the last 15 years, our schools are, not only have they been well managed, but we've actually gotten better and better. And, as far as our performances and our rankings. And so it's really kind of, we get a very good, and I thank everyone, we get a very good return on the investment, and so that's why, I think that, if we can make these cuts, I think it will continue, Cheshire will continue to be a strong educational system, and we will also have albeit slightly lower mill rate and tax rate for people, but it said that we're going to be in the exact same problem next year, and if we don't cut now, just like we didn't cut last year as much as I think we could have, we're going to be in a position where we're already using up a lot of the resources this year to cover holes in this budget. Who knows, maybe we'll be flush next year, but, we're already using up a lot of those funds. So, so that's why I think we need to go a little further than we are. I recognize the concern, and we don't know, and the future is unknown, but I do think that Cheshire will come out very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Veliver. Ms. Pearson, and then Mr. Malone.
I just wanted to respond to Councilor Veliver. Yes, if you look back decades over the budgets, one of the reasons why we're in this position is because we are now beginning to fund our schooling infrastructure by constructing 2 new schools. We still have, our newest school in this community was built in 1971. Only 1 school has air conditioning. This is unacceptable in a town like ours where we have a strong schooling system. And if we want to keep our teachers, sit in a classroom. If you've sat in that high school, you walk through that false front and suddenly you're in the 1950s again. And so we're going to have to address that high school sometime in the future. And you're absolutely right. You're right. This is the base budget. We are down a percentage point from last year, right? We're at 4.3% this year. We had a 5.23% increase the year before that. And it was a higher the year before that when you were a Republican-dominated council, right, at 5.93. So we are working steadily. We're in a new age where we're going to have to address our schooling infrastructure. It's been deferred for far too long. For 4 decades, it's been deferred, right? The false front was put on in the 1990s, if I'm remembering correctly. And so now we are addressing those needs. Unfortunately, as Councilor Jinks highlighted, this is a perfect storm. This is also, just as we're beginning to realize that debt service, we're also beginning to realize millions of decreases in our revenue as a result of our decreased mill rate, quite frankly, right? So now we no longer have the motor vehicle tax assistance, the pilot assistance, and so we've lost a great deal of state revenue, which is why it's really incumbent on us to contact our state legislators to address our state tax system. And I know some of us will be talking about this a little bit later, but this is unsustainable. And we are not alone. Cheshire is not alone, right? There are many municipalities across the state right now that are dealing with the effects of this reevaluation, because the reevaluation has hit all communities in our state. Our cities and our suburbs have all been hit by this reevaluation. And so how are our state legislators, how is our governor going to address this at a time with, and I recognize, Mr. Malone, no, we're not dealing directly with some of these federal funds, but we will be, and it will be hitting us indirectly. And so we're waiting to see how that all pans out. It is a difficult year. We are in difficult times, but I think what we've begun to put together is close to responsible, but I'm still unsatisfied with this budget, too.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Mr. Mylone.
Thank you, Peter. And I concur with you, Fiona, that I'd rather not see any further cuts to our Board of Education budget. I think they've done a good job. I think there are opportunities there that we've discussed that I don't think have been pursued yet, that don't affect any educational needs, such as dealing with looking at maybe bidding our health insurance out and being more effective with the cost of those elements. So I think there's opportunities. But we did, and you disagreed, but we did as a majority, and I did not agree at the time, but we did as a majority suggest a somewhat arbitrary reduction to the Board of Education budget, which was significant, and to suggest that that number was okay and that wasn't going to potentially affect our educational resources, but yet a slightly further reduction would. I just don't see there's any basis for that judgment. So I feel that this suggested reduction is just as appropriate as the initial suggested reduction, and I continue to support it because I think it reduces the tax impact on our community as a large.
Ms. Kramer?
They reduced initially by, I think, correct me if any of my numbers are wrong. I am not healthy, and I'm on medication that sometimes affects and causes brain fog, but I'll be as precise as I can. I believe we initially asked for a $2.2 million deduction in the initial ask from the Board of Ed, which is significant. And from Tuesday's meeting, another $360, and now tonight with the amendment, another $640, that would be another $1 million, so a third. Tonight's ask is not small. But the quagmire that you deal with cutting education funds is you don't know you've broken it until it breaks. So in this process, what we've done is we've asked the Board of Ed to come back with numbers that I'm not going to speak for everybody, that I have been comfortable in asking, thinking that it's not going to cause the rubber band to snap. We are stretching their ability to provide the Gold Star service that they've been providing. They are not wasteful. They came back proudly with a budget $2.2 million down from the initial ask. They're reducing it another $360 from last Tuesday. And I believe after the amount of deliberations that we've had with what is available, what services we provide, how much it costs, I believe if we cut more, we really will be in that gray area of it might snap. And I'm not willing to put that pressure on the BOE in Cheshire to see if we can possibly save $4 a month. I think they have cut to the bone any further, and I believe more cracks than already are there would start to show. And I think it would be doing a disservice to what the foundation of what Cheshire is, which is an amazing public school system.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Ms. Allard.
Just quickly, I would like to say that I am not comfortable with the arbitrary cut that we made to the BOE request of 360 without knowing exactly how that was going to impact them. That was me compromising simply because the message that I'm hearing from my Republican colleagues is that there's room there. There's room there that they're not telling you. But the Board of Ed is a bipartisan body that has a responsibility to find those cuts line by line. And I would think that if there were areas in which they could, we would have been made, notified of them when we asked them. So this is not a small ask. This is a considerably larger ask without knowing exactly how it is going to impact our schools. I have said in a previous meeting that if we're going to slash this budget even further, what I would be more comfortable with is finding areas for deeper cuts on the town side that are equal to what you are proposing for the Board of Ed, because I don't think that it is difficult to make a decision to cut somebody else's funds when you're not in their purse. If you don't know where that money is going to, that's not a difficult decision at all. That's rather easy. But I don't think it's the right decision. And that's where I stand.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Jinks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I appreciate the portion of the amendment that has to do with trying to reinstate our suggested new service this year of the bulky waste drop-off. Bulky waste has sort of become a tug of war for some reason on the council over the years. I mean, two of the last 3 times we've done it, it wasn't paid for out of really operating budget. It wasn't paid for out of local property taxes, really. We did it, I don't remember the date, but when we did it 3 times ago, it was after 5 years we hadn't done it, and there was a lot of stuff we collected. The next time we did it, 2 years after that, we collected less stuff, but the cost went up. The next year we did it, 2 years later, which was 2 years ago, we collected less stuff and the cost went up even more. So bulky waste is something that is becoming, like everything else, much more expensive and less efficient for the budget. But I really appreciate the suggestion from Public Works to have this once a month drop off. And if we can find a way, perhaps, to do that this year, I certainly would be supportive of that. But I'm not supportive of a really large additional ask of the Board of Ed. We spent more time this budget season going over Board of Ed expenses than we have in my previous, five times going through this. I mean, we met with the Board of Ed at least 3 times. We had lots of discussions. We had more visibility into their spending this year than we've ever had. And I feel like, as of our last meeting, that we were all generally in agreement with where we were as far as that additional ask, knowing what we'd seen and feeling like, that cut was, hopefully not going to cause a significant number of additional cuts on the Board of Ed side in terms of teachers. As was presented, it looks like we're going to have some that will increase our student-to-teacher ratio a little bit. I think highest since, I don't know what Jeff said, but it's been several years since it's been this high. So, the little experience that I have in teaching something, I know that, there's a big difference between a class of, 16, 17 kids and 20, 21 kids, or 19 kids even. There's a huge difference in trying to manage that group of kids, especially at the younger ages. So, I think this additional ask would certainly go to cutting of teachers and increasing class sizes, based on everything that we've seen to this point. So I'm not supportive of this amendment, but like I said, I am supportive of us trying to find a way to reinstate the bulky waste, pickup in some way at some point. Thanks.
Further discussion? All right, I get a chance now. Mr. Velleber, while I certainly applaud your effort to go lower, I won't be supporting the amendment. And there was some question about the what was called an arbitrary 360. So let me tell you where that came from, and let me tell you what I did with it. The 360 was because I was trying to cut the Board of Education down to a 4% increase, which is exactly where we fell, 4.0 increase, and that was the 360. While I did not discuss it directly with the council, I did reach out to the chair of the Board of Education, understanding that the town council cannot tell the Board of Education how to spend their money. But my conversation with with Chair Rosenberg was that the Medical Benefits Trust Fund increase was $1.57 million over last year. If we reduce that by the $360,000, which was the number that I came up with, that would still leave a little over $1.2 million in that fund. It would also allow for a $100,000 increase over current funding levels to the Medical Benefits Trust Fund. It was my hope that they can, with that, finish the next fiscal year with that 1.55 months that they currently have, and hopefully it's a good Medical Benefits Trust Fund year, and that actually increases to the 2 that they've been chasing. So that's where I was coming from with the 360. The 640 now turns that 360 into $1 million, and for $4.33 per month, I just it's not something, an additional cut I can support. And with that, I will call for a vote. The amendment as it stands now on the table is to reduce the Board of Education budget by a total of $640,000. There would be additionally, the amendment calls for a decrease in the pool subsidy of $25,000 and use of NEF funds in the total of $25,000, which would allow for a $50,000 funding of bulky waste at the transfer station. With those amendment changes, the mill rate would be 29.58, and it would mean an average increase or an increase to the average taxpayer of property tax and 2 cars of $621 per year. Was that was that a good summation of, okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. There's been a lot of discussion. So with that, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of the amendment? All opposed? Motion fails by a 6-3 count. That brings us back to our original motion and the budget, which is on the table, of 29.74 mils, and I will go to Mr. Mylone from the Budget Committee.
So I will not be supporting this budget because I was in favor of the previous amendment. And my statements that I said previously about the hard work that we all did and the respect for everyone here, I reiterate. I do want to have just a point of kind of clarification, Peter, because I have tremendous respect for you as the chair of the council, but my recollection of our budget workshop was that I personally suggested what would happen if we looked at a 4% increase. It came from me, and it was an arbitrary suggestion. You took it and we put it up on the board, and you were comfortable with it. You agreed that it would go forward. If you had offline comments or conversations with someone from the Board of Education that suggested that you could support that and didn't share it with us, I'm personally disappointed at this point, because I would have liked that information to be available to me when we were having our deliberations. So with that, I'll complete my comments, but I will not be supporting this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Malone. Just to clarify, my conversation with Chair Rosenberg was after our meeting to finalize the budget last Tuesday. With that, Mr. Velaber, comments?
Great. Thank you very much. And I know I already spoke on this earlier as part of the amendment, but I wanted to go back to the beginning and just say I'd like to start by thanking my colleagues on the council for all of their hard work and dedication on this budget. It was not easy. In my 8 years on the council, this was the most fun budget we've had on this. I'm not going to say that this didn't start in a very dark place. I think it's still pretty dark, but it's a lot less dark than it was. And so I appreciate everyone's contributions. I'd also like to thank Sean Kimball, Arnett Talbot, Andrew Martelli, Jim Jascott and his staff, and all other staff members who were involved in putting together the budget and all the department heads. I also wanted, I know we asked a lot of Sean, as well as Superintendent Solon, COO Massiana, and Assistant Superintendent Solano, as well as the Board of Education, to come up with and challenge them with a lot of things, you know, to come up with some stuff. And they really did a great job of helping us through this process, and we came to a number. Even though I truly appreciate all that hard work that's gone into this budget, it is truly much better than it started out as being. I think it can go further, as represented by the amendment. And I think we did cut very deeply on both sides, but I think on the town side, well, we've already got it below a 2% rate, which is below even what our employees' salaries are going up. So that will be, you know, so I think we've already made some significant cuts on the town side, but we also made them on the Board of Ed side as well. But we really need to continue to look at cutting this budget. As an aside, I know people often know that I attend a lot of ribbon cuttings. I like to do that because it sends a message to new businesses in town that Cheshire appreciates you, that Cheshire is welcoming to you, and that Cheshire wants you to be here, so that we're here to participate and celebrate with you as you start new businesses. And as I looked at this budget, I thought to myself, wow, I could really use a pair of those big golden scissors that we use for ribbon cuttings to use on this budget. But although, obviously, you know, I think that's, you know, I think we really need to make some changes, but as I said, we will go forward with this, and Cheshire will prosper. Cheshire will continue to be a great town. Although not everyone moves to Cheshire for the nightlife, as we've heard many, many times through this process, they also don't only move here simply because of the school system. Cheshire needs to continue to be an affordable, well-managed, well-run town that is accessible to all members of the community, both young, old, families, single people, and businesses. We need to continue to provide excellent services at a reasonable price, and it is something that we've been doing for decades, and it is something that we need to be able to continue to provide for our residents so that we don't tax our residents out of being able to enjoy this town. As we heard it from many of the residents who came up and spoke, they're concerned that with tax increases that they are going to have to maybe move out of town. And that was a theme that we heard from some past councils that weren't, you know, and some past councilors, and that didn't play out well. So when we're considering this budget, even though we're faced by many fiscal problems in, you know, creating this budget, it's very important that we look at cut as much as possible, because every budget, as I mentioned, is the basis for next year's budget. And if we don't cut now, we'll just start at a higher basis, which is what happened last year. This is the current majority did not make significant enough cuts, I feel, last year, and we had a massive tax increase. And now we're starting from a new high amount, and we ended up with another super high tax increase. Granted, there were some attenuating factors there, but it's 150% of what it was last year. I think we need to make more cuts, and we need to live within our means and do what's right for all residents of Cheshire. So, so with that, I will say that one thing I would also like to point out, because something was mentioned, that, past councils had somehow not done what they were supposed to do, and that we're now living with those issues. And that may be true, that, the schools were not always brought up, but they were always well-maintained. And they did that in a way that kept our taxes low. And, as far as think, one of the things that we always have to do is, we have to look at this idea, that, somehow, the implication that somehow we should have been taxing people more money over years, I don't think is proper. We should not be taxing people more than we need to tax people. And ultimately, as to the schools go, one of the things that is we all like to look back at schools and say, wow, this is really expensive, we should have done this back in the 80s or 90s. But guess what? It was just as expensive relative to the time to do it back in the 80s and 90s as it is now. It's just a bigger number. And one of the issues that comes up is, when we go back and look at those things, when we have the tax consequences, one of the issues was, the town council can only do so much, if the taxpayers aren't ready to make that expenditure. And based on living here in those times, I don't believe that the taxpayers were ready to make those big expenditures then. And in fact, I would like to say that the past Republican council was almost a profile in courage, in the sense by helping to move this process along when there was not exactly an overwhelming sense that this was a good thing. The people were concerned with new schools. They were going to be expensive, but the council, the Republican council, with help from its Democratic members, were able to convince the taxpayers of Cheshire that now was the time for schools. And so with that, the council was able to do that. So yes, maybe past councils didn't do what other people may have thought they should have done, but in the end, they kept taxes low, and more importantly, Cheshire was and continues to be a well-run, low-tax town that people want to move to, want to be here, want to open businesses here, and I hope that that can continue. So with that, I would say that I am not in favor and will be voting against this budget because I think it still needs to be cut more. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Veliver. Mr. Walsh?
Thank you. First, I just want to add one addendum to what Mr. Jinks said, thanking everybody. I want to add 9 council members, $0 per capita, so who put in many hours here. So we all put in many hours of this, and sometimes I think it goes unappreciated, but every one of us has put in many, many hours here, and I hope that the town understands. Whether we agree or disagree on the budget, we all are doing it for what we feel is the best choice for Cheshire, not just the best choice for our party or what we think will get us a vote. It's all for what we have. We all have different opinions on what's best for us, but in the long run, we are all here because we want to be here and we want to make sure that this town continues to thrive. So, and I'd like to add $1 to the budget to get Mr. Milone a cover for his microphone, if you don't mind. I think I could get full approval for that.
I think someone stole the one. I think someone stole one.
It wasn't me,
No, I'm blaming P&Z.
Well, I want to thank Sean Kimball and Arnett and Andrew and their staff, Jim Jascott. I know the town staff put a lot of work into creating our budget this year. I appreciate all the department heads who understood how difficult this budget was going to be and made very difficult choices in their departments. I also appreciate Dr. Solon, our superintendent, Vin Massiano, our chief operating officer. Yeah, we're tough on you, but you're tough on us too. So I think it comes and goes, but I appreciate the hard work you did, and I'm going to miss you next year when this comes. I hope you come back and we'll grill us. But I want to thank my colleagues on this day. Like I said, we worked many hours, and we all take the fiduciary responsibilities of this town very seriously, and we would never make suggested reductions that we feel would negatively impact the way this town is run or how our children would be educated. I understand that every dollar we take away will affect something, but these are difficult decisions we must make to make sure we are doing what we were elected for. This has been an extremely difficult budget, as everyone has said, but we knew it would be last year. Last year, during our budget adoption, when I voted in favor of the budget, I challenged our town manager, the department heads, the superintendent of schools, and our budget chair to begin working on ways to limit the increases this year by finding places to save or other streams of revenue. I believe our town manager did work extremely hard to find ways to lower his budget, but I think some of the others could have worked a little harder to find ways to increase revenue and decrease spending. Do I think we could have brought the mill rate lower? Yes. And some of the examples that part of the planning that I had talked about last year would have been the Chesapicot Health District, which has cost the town over $100,000 from the previous year. If we left Chesapicot and went to the South Central Health District, we would have gotten part of a $1.3 million fund balance that they had, and we would have been able to use part of that maybe for this year's budget. We are now 16 months into the decision to stay with them, and we aren't in any better shape with our health district. The minority representatives on this council were also surprised to hear last May that the town received a state grant from excess funds in the state budget. Imagine that, excess funds in the state budget. Our council chair was contacted by state officials and was told they had some extra money and asked if there were any projects we needed funding for. The chair, without input from the council, chose to get a $350,000 grant for Chesapicot, again, who had $1.3 million in their fund balance, instead of finding a project within our town that could have saved our taxpayers money. And then again, back in January, which we already discussed, we took $5,500 from the NEF fund to give to a composting project at the Boulder Knoll. Listen, I have no issues with composting. I think it's a great thing, but I also think that a nonprofit coming to the town to ask for funding in a very difficult budget year is not the right time. And I wish they could have found other funding rather than taking the money from our NEF fund. It's just not the right way to use our taxpayers' dollars. Instead, we ended up, 2 months later, deducting from just about every department, including $5,500, ironically the same number, from the chamber, which we normally give for the fireworks at the Fall Festival. It's a tough year, so we're going to have to figure out how we're going to deal with the Fall Festival without fireworks. I know also we had to cut the bulky trash, and I was hoping that we could have gotten that amendment done earlier today to get that, because I know everybody needs a place to bring their bulky waste, but I'm hoping that somehow in this coming year we could find the funds to do that. We can't spend for the sake of spending. This year was a year to cut spending, and I do believe, like I said, the town manager did as much as he could before we would need to start removing services. The real problem this year was the loss in revenue from the state, which accounts for nearly $2.5 million. This, along with the first part of our school debt hitting, made for a difficult budget. I felt that we could have taken an additional $640,000 from the education request. Based on the past several years, we can expect there to be more than 6 retirements. We also feel that there is a strong need to put out to bid the medical part of our budget, which costs us $16 million a year. I know Mr. Mylone had suggested creating a committee, and I hope we will create a committee to look into the medical side for both the town and the board, so that we can make sure that we are getting the best deal we can, and not just hoping that we're getting the best deal we can. I know people would think that this is an anti-education decision, but it isn't by any means. It is a decision where we'll have to make sacrifices in order to keep this town affordable. One of the things that was suggested, years of not working on our infrastructure that Ms. Pearson said, I agree that we went years without doing a lot to our infrastructure, but in 17 years, from 98 to 2015, there was a 1,000 student reduction in the enrollment. It went from over 5,000 students at one point to just over 4,000. So those really aren't the times to start saying, hey, let's build new schools while we're losing enrollment. Once the enrollment stabilized and started increasing is when You know, the town council decided this is the time that we need to start looking into our infrastructure, and we did. And I think successfully, we got these 2 schools built, or getting them built. The average taxpayer has seen an increase in their taxes by over $1,000 these past 2 years. Prior to that, the average taxpayer increase was less than $1,000 total in 6 years. Less than $1,000 in 6 years, and now it's $1,000 in 2 years. I don't know how we can continue this. It would have been easy to just pass along the recommendations from our department heads and Board of Education without questioning anything, and I wish we could. But we wouldn't be doing our jobs. We were elected to help run this town efficiently and prudently while keeping the amenities that we are all accustomed to. Our education system is top-notch, giving our students the best education they can receive. We also must keep this town affordable for all, whether it's young professionals, the families, the empty nesters, the seniors, and our businesses. Every dollar we add to the budget costs us all more in our taxes, and we must remember that we have a number of residents in this town who live on fixed incomes. We also have a number of businesses, small and large, who are finding it difficult because they all get taxed. Being one of the only business owners on this council in town, I understand the ramifications of the increased mill rate because it's going to affect my taxes for my business as well. I cannot support this budget as is. This is a vote for, this is going to be a vote for the many people who sent emails and came before us telling us how difficult it is to remain in this town. From the retired gentleman who lives in a 55 and older complex with his wife and needs to take on a part-time job to make ends meet, to the woman who has been working on her forever home for several years and is concerned that she won't be able to stay there, to the man who is on a fixed income and can't afford another large increase. This vote is for them. We need to be careful. The next few budgets will see large increases to our debt service because of the new schools. The North End commercial development will not be on our tax books for 2 years. I am again challenging our town manager, his department heads, and our superintendent of schools, along with our budget chair, to begin working on ways to limit spending next year and find other streams of revenue. It will be extremely difficult if we don't. Although we have all worked hard to bring down the budget from what the town manager originally delivered to us, and I understand the loss in state funding was a large factor, I believe we could have saved our taxpayers some extra money with more reductions. Because of those reasons, I cannot support this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Ms. Pearson?
Thank you. Just a few comments of clarification. The per capita for chess actually decreased, did it not, this last year? So
There was additional costs that we agreed on in executive session. I can't discuss.
okay. And then the 5,500 for the NEF can't be used for fireworks, just to clarify for the community. And the NEF funds that we did provide to Boulder Knoll Farms, and congratulations to them. They had their ribbon cutting today regarding their new composting facility is open to the public. So it is a public service that's being provided, just as we provide a public service at the transfer station with electronics and the mattresses and leaves. This will be a service for the community where individuals can take their compost and divert it from our waste stream, and this is a way of reducing costs for our town. So it's a different way to read that comment.
It is limited, though, to 20 residents, they told us.
It's a pilot program, so it's a pilot program that we would hopefully, if it's successful, expand because it will serve our community. I just wanted to provide those clarifications, and just because we receive or we see a decrease in enrollment, 5,000 to 4,000, doesn't mean that our students don't need air conditioning in the hot months and updated facilities. But that's just a few comments, just a response. I have to begin, like all of my colleagues, by thanking our many municipal leaders in the room here tonight and not here tonight for sharing with us their amazing work they are doing for our residents in our town. We understand how many hours go into putting these budgets together and how difficult it is, particularly in a year like this when we're losing revenue from the state, beginning to see the debt from our new schools, and having to ask for incredibly difficult cuts. I also want to express my sincere appreciation to all my fellow town councilors. You've conscientiously listened to hours upon hours of presentations, and you've asked really smart questions, and I appreciate all of the knowledge each one of you brings to our conversations. I thank our town manager, superintendent, and our Board of Education for all their work in identifying both additional sources of revenue as well as line items which we might consider doing without. Finally, I thank all the many town residents who shared their concerns during our public town hall, during our many meetings with department heads, in emailed comments, or in casual conversation at local events or even at the grocery store. We heard you, and we share your concerns. With this budget, we're ending with a total increase of 4.23%, which is lower than the 5.23% increase that the town council approved last year, and the 5.93% increase that the previous town council approved in 2023. We are increasing our municipal budget by only 1.93% and the school budget by a flat 4%. Those numbers don't keep up with wages nor inflation, so significant cuts will take place this next fiscal year. We understand that even though the currently proposed mill rate of 29.74 is down from its high of 35.09 in 2023, residents are paying higher taxes due to property reevaluations. Most residents are grateful that our homes have increased in value, which will benefit us all in the future. But we only see such value when our homeowners sell their homes. We on Town Council fully understand that we all cannot pay our monthly bills with our rising home values. And as I've mentioned previously, we're only now beginning to pay for over 4 decades of chronic disinvestment in our schooling infrastructure. These are very real consequences when we choose not to invest in our infrastructure and support our municipal services. Voters in this town recognize that fact, which is why they overwhelmingly voted in support of building new schools and investing in our future, even though they knew it would increase their taxes. Those voters acknowledge that we have disinvested for too long, and now we are paying the price. All that said, we understand that making up for decades of disinvestment is painful, which is why I'm proud that we on the Town Council in January of this year unanimously voted to again increase the tax relief income threshold for veterans and elderly and disabled homeowners and renters. We must look out for and protect our most vulnerable residents. This year has been particularly difficult with the significant reductions to revenue from the state and the addition of debt service for our new schools. Understanding that we are not to see the revenue from the North End development for another 2 years, we all agreed that cuts would need to be made to the town managers' and superintendent's original budgets. The Town Council and Board of Education worked diligently to identify line items that we might be able to cut or reduce. We also reached out to our state legislators. I actually submitted testimony requesting that they redress inequities by increasing funding to our schools and supporting tax increases for the wealthiest in our state. All that said, I am not satisfied where we ended up. I strongly believe that the cuts that were made during our final meeting on Tuesday, April 15th, took us too far. I am not comfortable passing a budget containing cuts that may very well result in layoffs of current teachers in our school district. Up until that point, we were discussing approving freezing of currently unfilled positions, which are grim cuts indeed. But those cuts those cuts will make the work of current city employees and teachers more difficult because there will be fewer people in town to assist. However, those cuts would not put a local tax-paying neighbor out of a job, all while increasing our class sizes. Those final cuts made layoffs possible, tipped me over the edge. If savings from school retirements or state funds from this past legislative session do emerge, and I hope they do, I hope the superintendent of Board of Education consider not cutting any teacher or paraeducator positions, as well as middle school athletics and elementary school STEM programs. These are important in our community. My own children have long graduated from our schools, but I fully understand the incredible shared value of a strong schooling system in our community. Our public goods are ever so important. Our libraries, parks, police, firefighters, creative arts, human services, water treatment plants, pools, sidewalks, and streets. Our public goods enrich our lives and ensure our community remains strong. In sum, I appreciate the diligent work that goes into this process, and I thank all those involved as we were faced with difficult choices that led to making difficult decisions. This budget is lean. There is absolutely no excess, much less what was proposed tonight. In fact, I strongly believe we have already cut too far, which is why I cannot support this budget tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson. Mr. Jinks, did you want to?
Yeah, I'll, I had plenty to say earlier, about an hour and a half ago, but I'll just say a couple of words again. First of all, yeah, just to reiterate, thanks again to my colleagues for all the work that we all have done. I mean, it's, I don't know if people realize it's close to 30 hours of meetings to discuss the finer points of the budget and try to work out all this. And after all that, we came pretty close in terms of coming to an agreement, obviously, with, a difference of, this amendment tonight would have lowered it to $4 or so. So we came very close and worked very hard to coming to an agreement here. But a couple things, we started off at a 12% increase, the initial requested budget. We ended up, when people were coming in to say that, where we were at 8.1% at that point was unsustainable and we can't afford to live for anymore. From there, we reduced it almost in half, so we're down to 4.32%, I believe is the number now, or 4.24, something along those lines. But anyway, we've reduced the budget significantly since, the initial ask, and even since we had the forum where people were asking for more. We provided more. And just to touch on, there's going to be plenty of time to discuss Chesprocott obviously soon, but the people of Cheshire decided to stay with Chesprocott. We had a public session, a public hearing on the matter where, dozens of people came out, more than, I had seen until we had this forum, actually, recently, had come out to express a desire to stay with Chesprocott. Since then, we have, the per capita rate went from $13.15 down to $11.15, which is a savings of $60,000. They're renting a building from us, which, assuming they're in that building at some point soon, they're going to be paying us rent of $54,000. So that's $114,000. So the original savings of $126 is now down to $114. So it's, there isn't a whole lot there. And the difference isn't really that great. And then, the acting health director has proposed a reduction to $10.15 this year. It seems that I'm not sure if we're going to get there. It seems the board chair is probably against that, but hopefully we can get there as a board to reduce this per capita rate even more. So Chesprocott is becoming more efficient for sure. That per capita rate we haven't seen since 2017. So I don't think anywhere in the budget we're going back to 2017 levels. If we are, someone please let me know. As far as Chesprocott goes, that's what I would say is, it definitely is becoming more affordable. I don't think that there was any guarantee that we were going to be given back some amount of money, but it may have been the case. It certainly wouldn't have been anywhere near the 1.3 million fund balance they had at the time. So there isn't really, we can't make the case that there's savings from that could, some mythically appear for us this year. The idea that we're starting next year in the same hole, I think, is incorrect. Next year we're not going to be going into a loss of, all the state revenue we're talking about. It's already gone. We're not going to get it's not a part of this budget. We're already well below what we were getting last year in terms of state and federal funds. So next year we're sort of going to be going into a budget where we're really living well within, more within our own means than we have been before. So I'm not saying next year is going to be easy by any means. Hopefully our grand list will grow a little bit more than it did this year. That should help. Hopefully we can find some other revenue sources, as Mr. Walsh has suggested we could find. But it's not going to be, we're not going to be in the same situation we are this year by any means. But again, I just want to say thank you to everyone, to Sean, to Jim, department heads. We really appreciate everything you guys have done for the council and for us and getting us through this process. It feels like it's been 2 budget seasons rather than 1, and glad that we are finally here tonight. Thanks.
Ms. Allard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of what I have to say is probably a repeat of what has already been said, but I wanted to kind of highlight the process of the budget for the thousands of people who are watching on YouTube Channel 14. I'd like to start by thanking Sean Kimball, Dr. Solon, Jim Jascott, Vin Massiana, each and every department head director, the volunteer BOE members, as well as my fellow council members for their dedication to this process and thoughtful input. Thanks specifically to our Mayor Peter Talbot for your leadership and dedication to providing transparency to our community by holding a special town hall meeting regarding this critical, important political decision. Most importantly, I'd like to thank the members of the community who took the time to provide comments, share concerns, and provide so many wonderful ideas. Please know that your input was heard and at the forefront of our minds as we strove towards serving the best interest of our community with fiscal responsibility. The town's budget is a process, and it's determined by a process with many checks and balances and is months in the making. Starting in December, the town department heads carefully examine what was previously spent to create an informed estimation of the amount needed to address the challenges and objectives for the upcoming fiscal year. Once the department heads have submitted their budget requests, they meet with Town Manager Sean Kimball and employ a strategic approach to identify possibilities for reductions or look for expenses that can be deferred. A similar process is done on the school side with equal scrutiny provided by the COO Vin Massiana, Superintendent Jeff Solon, as well as the members of the Board of Education to determine the financial needs to meet our obligation to educate the children within this town. All individuals involved are sensitive to the importance of maintaining low tax rates for this year, particularly considering our municipality's financial climate. The initial proposed mill rate, just to maintain the status quo with no additional services, would have increased the current mill rate from 27.46 mills to a proposed mill rate of 31.16 mills. This would have resulted to an average annual property tax increase of $1,129 per household. The proposed operating budget was then provided to the Town Council on March 10th. Over the course of the next 5 weeks, the council members combed through the budget books, participated in caucus discussions, provided outreach to the community to solicit input, asked questions, participated in approximately 25 hours of budget workshop meetings, as well as follow-up meetings to gain clarity. In addition to that time we've collectively invested to this process, I can personally attest that some of us lost a few hours of sleep thinking about how this budget will impact the community. We don't take these decisions lightly. Through this collaborative effort, the final mill rate to be voted on tonight was determined on April 15th to be 29.74 mills. This reduces the originally proposed tax increase from $1,129 per average household to a much lower tax increase of $673 per average household. The originally proposed mill rate of 31.16 mills was reduced to 29.74 mills, a reduction of 1.42 mills. To underscore the magnitude of that accomplishment, in order to cut the budget by 0.1 mills, a reduction of nearly $400,000 needed to be made. Again, that $400,000 needed to be cut in order to make a 0.1 mil reduction. Through our collaborative efforts, we were able to reduce it 1.42 mills. These decisions were difficult, and there are aspects of it that I am absolutely not comfortable with. The hiring freeze that will require town and school staff to do even more work in spite of increasing demands. The reductions to the town's already slender budget request, and mostly the drastic cuts, some without specifications, to the Board of Education, making it even more difficult for our schools to meet the needs of our children. In fact, I was recently criticized by one of my peers in one of the meetings for not being able to state a tax increase amount that I found palatable. When I think about what might be palatable to the community, I ask myself, is there really any tax increase amount that is palatable to the families already struggling to put food on the table, pay medical bills, and make ends meet? Is there really any dollar amount increase that is palatable to the senior citizen living on fixed incomes or the small business owner trying to keep the lights on? There really isn't. Nobody wants to pay higher taxes. However, as a municipality, we have an obligation to provide a quality education to our children in this community, to provide public safety and emergency services, to maintain public utilities, infrastructure, and to provide social services to the most vulnerable. These municipal service obligations are crucial for a thriving community, but come at a cost, influenced by such things as rising prices and soaring health insurance expenses. My only goal in this process was to strike a balance between meeting the needs and expectations of the community while also keeping the tax burden as low as possible. Any change to one side of that equation will have an effect on the other. With so many factors to consider, to me, it was impossible to determine a budget by randomly picking a number. Any budget cuts should never be executed haphazardly by swinging a chainsaw blindly. I believe it's crucial that any budget cuts are made with surgical precision and a thorough understanding of the affected services. Additionally, it was never my priority in this budget process to make Dina Allard feel comfortable. And it most definitely was never my goal to pick an amount that might make Dina Allard look favorable in an election year. I am uncomfortable with how razor-thin this budget is and would not support any additional cuts that would further jeopardize our ability to meet the community needs. I will support this budget and urge my fellow council members to do the same. Any attempt at delaying this process or a vote against it for the possibility of saving $4.33 a month threatens our ability to meet our deadline under the town's charter. This is a point that I recently learned I think is very important that the town of Cheshire knows. It is important that the people of Cheshire know that if this budget fails, if we cannot come to a consensus and rely on the collaboration that we all provided for this process, the mill rate will revert back to the 31.16 originally planned by the town manager, and the average increase per taxpayer will be $1,129. With that said, I think that we should vote for this budget, as I feel that we've all put in tremendous effort and great strides towards coming to this conclusion. However, if there are people in the town who feel that the $4.33 per month is going to jeopardize your ability to thrive in this community, I would urge you to reach out to our Social Services Department for tax relief assistance. I don't think any one of us is completely satisfied with this outcome, but I feel confident that the collaborative work we have all put in strikes a balance of meeting the needs of the community in the most fiscally responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. Mr. Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to thank everyone for the tireless work to get us to this point of in the budget process, which started earlier in the year and culminates this evening. Thank you to Sean Kimball, Noel Shepard, and Andrew Martelli, Arnett Talbot, Jim Jascott and his team in the finance office, Dr. Solon and his staff, the Board of Education, and Vin Messiana, who has done a magnificent job explaining the details of the education budget. Thank you to all of the department heads that presented and those that did not, who I look forward to hearing to at some point soon. I want to give a special word of appreciation to all my co-counselors who serve alongside me, and a special thank you to all of our loved ones who have supported us through this budget season. Lots of late and sleepless nights. I assure you that not a single one of us takes our obligation lightly, and the people who stand beside us outside of this building can attest to that. I also want to acknowledge the people of our town. This town is full of caring, devoted, and passionate citizens who offered many very well-articulated and thoughtful ideas. We read or heard every one of them, and every one of them was taken seriously and factored into our ultimate decision. This was a very hard choice for all of us. There will be strong feelings associated with the decision this council will make tonight. We all understand that. What I am voting for tonight will not be easy for many, myself included. I am choosing to do what I think will, in the long run, be for the best stability of the town of Cheshire. You will hear tonight about austerity and how this is the year to make big cuts to drive the tax burden lower. Our town is run efficiently and without frills. We are awarded a high standard of living in Cheshire, in no small part to the employees of the town, many of whom live here. Cuts mean people lose their jobs, and those that remain employed carry a greater burden in their day-to-day workload. Cuts mean a direct impact on the services that people rely on and have come to expect from this town. Most of us will go with less this year. We will not get all the roads paved that we want. We will not get bulky waste picked up, and we will have to be accustomed to that pile in the basement growing just a little bit larger. The grass in the parks might grow a little bit longer between mows. The hours of the library might not be as convenient. But we as a community should show some grace to those who are struggling and acknowledge the person working to make this a spectacular town who might be asked to do just a little bit more with less. We as a group had to make the decision that there would be positions in town that would remain vacant, impacting citizen taxpayers as well as school and town employees alike. Weighing who and what is sacrificed for the greater good is by far the most difficult decision we make in this role, and not one decision is made without counsel from stakeholders and professionals. We are facing a time of uncertainty in our state, country, and world. The stress of daily living can be felt every day, and I do not want our town to fall victim to the current sentiments that all government is wasteful and bloated. All of us have gone through our big fat budget workbooks line by line. There is no excess in this budget. We didn't find any gotchas buried, only well thought out plans and strategies. Many people wrote to us about maintaining the high standard we have set for our schools. Although we did lower the amount the Board of Education requested this year, we are certainly not underfunding education in this town. A large part of the increase in taxes is to start paying for 2 brand-new elementary schools approved by referendum. These 2 schools will be examples of how seriously we take funding our schools in Cheshire. But the amount of money requested by the Board of Education to run our schools should also take into consideration the increased amount of taxes we are asking everyone in town to take on with these new schools. I am confident that Dr. Solon, his staff, and the Board of Education will continue to achieve the highest standard of education with the budget this council is voting on this evening. Going forward, Cheshire needs to embrace smart, well-thought-out growth while taking the time to think about how to establish new revenue as well as analyzing underperforming and weak revenue streams. We will continue to work to find better and more efficient ways to operate our town. I would like the community to continue to offer their input and commit to working on this objective alongside them. Again, I want to thank every single person who offered input into this budget season. We on Town Council have been trusted to make hard decisions, with this being the most challenging. Although some will not agree with the choices that will be made, please understand that there is not a single person on this dais who is not totally invested in moving Cheshire towards a more sustainable, prosperous future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. Ms. Kramer.
Thank you. I wanted to start my speech tonight with a thank you to the town, BOE, answering endless amounts of questions, sometimes repeatedly. To my fellow counselors, thank you for challenging me every step of the way. I really learned a lot about where I sit politically when it comes to these types of decisions that we have to all work together to get to. And we did challenge each other constantly, counterpoint for counterpoint, debate for debate. We didn't and we don't always agree. As a case in point, I felt that I would, of course, like to have seen this budget go lower. But I bet everybody would have. Almost to the point where I was considering not supporting it. And I'm not done with my thank yous yet, because through that turmoil, there are lots of sleepless nights. Our families have been supporting us and watching us go through this process and doing the best they can. And a special shout out to my doctors who tried to tell me to have less stress in my life and get better rest. And I've been actively working against that for the last 2 months. But thank you for the challenge. I put out a plea on the Facebook forum for emailed testimony if people couldn't come in person, and the town delivered, and it was really helpful. And I thanked everybody multiple times for submitting testimony. Don't stop doing that. We read it, we read every word, and it helps us, feel the commonality with everybody else who we are here to try and represent to the best of our ability. We asked for a lot of cuts, and then we asked for more cuts, and then we asked for more cuts. And I even asked for more cuts to the point where I was unsure if I would be putting people out of work or damaging our stellar school system. But what weighs on me, especially in my specific circumstances, is a $50 tax increase a month might take a prescription out of someone's refrigerator. It might take a meal off of someone's table. We took it very, very seriously. But after going through every budget multiple times with a fine-tooth comb, I see no fat. We are lean. We are at the point of asking for more and providing less. And every BOE budget cut, even if it's not firing a teacher, if you're taking away a staff development hour, if you are withholding available help in the classroom, it all affects the teachers that are still there. So even though you're saving their job, you are making their job harder. I think that we were able to get to a point where our public schools in Cheshire are still safe. And time will tell, and I think that we've tried our best. A large portion of the increase this year, about 2/3 of where we've landed, is debt service for the schools. I was hoping some of that would be able to be better absorbed into the existing budget, but we boiled it, we simmered it down to as concentrated as it could be, and I firmly stand behind that. And after, this last week from the last cuts on Tuesday, I didn't think we went far enough. And I was really considering not voting for the budget tonight. But over the last week, through deliberations, through research, through going back over the budget books and over the past meetings and looking at the testimony, I really am comfortable voting for the budget this evening. And I look forward to watching Cheshire thrive. Thank you, everybody. It's been an amazing experience.
Thank you, Ms. Kramer. Anyone else quickly before I get my opportunity and we call for a vote? Seeing none. The nice thing about going last is that everything has all been said, if not once, probably multiple times. But it won't stop me from starting with thank yous. So, because I don't think that we can thank these people enough for the work that they did. Sean Kimball, Arnett Talbot, Andrew Martelli, Noel, yeah, it's been a long night already. Noel Shepard, I was going to say clerk Shepard, Noel Shepard, all the department heads, thank you for your hard work and dedication. To the Education Department, Jeff Solon, Vin Massiana, can't believe it's your last budget. I'm going to miss you terribly. I know, he does look brokenhearted. The Board of Education, thank you for your willingness to have the tough conversations, for your assistance in managing through this incredibly difficult budget season. To the Budget Committee, Chair Jim Jinks, Fiona Pearson, John Mylone, and to all my colleagues on the Town Council. Thank you for your focus. Thank you for your efforts, for your compromise, your healthy debate over the countless hours that we spent getting to tonight. I know this vote won't be unanimous. When a group of 9 individuals are faced with a task this difficult, there are bound to be disagreements on the outcome. Personally, I'm not happy with this budget either. But over the many hours we spent, I came to realize that when you're faced with the perfect storm of influences all working against you, there comes a point where you either stop cutting or you risk destroying the level of services that residents have come to know and expect in this town. If you watch any of the Connecticut TV stations and listen to news reports, you hear stories every night about the budget issues facing the cities and towns across this state. Stories about our neighbors in Wallingford contemplating a 19% tax increase. North Haven contemplating a 9% tax increase. And that applies as well to peer towns like Avon, Farmington, and Simsbury. This was not an easy year, nor was it an easy process. We eliminated the nice-to-haves, like the Fall Festival fireworks, the bulky waste drop-off at the transfer station, and yes, the December gathering for our board and commission's volunteers. Setting the budget is without question the most difficult thing we do as council members. We set everyone's tax rate, including our own. And in the case of Mr. Walsh, he's setting it twice for himself. One as a resident, one as a business owner in this community. We hear from our constituents daily via email, text, phone calls, and from just being neighbors and from shopping in local stores. We've all been stopped in the grocery aisle at least once. I commend Mr. Jinks and my colleagues for the additional listening session to hear from our residents, and for his instituting a public comment session at all of our budget meetings. Hearing from our residents is a critical component of this process. This is my 14th budget with the Town Council. It was by far the worst that I have experienced, and most difficult. There will be those who said we went too far, and those who say we didn't go far enough. Again, this is a budget based on compromise, and as I said earlier, I am not happy with this budget, but I will support it. And with that, I will call for a vote. All in favor of the operating budget that was proposed about 2 hours ago from Mr. Jinks, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. And those opposed, the budget passes by a count of 5-4. Those voting against, Ms. Pearson, Mr. Walsh, Mr. Veliber, and Mr. Mylone. And that, with that, we move on in our agenda to item 4, the adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 Water Pollution Control Department Fund Operating Budget. Back to you, Chair Jinks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution number 042225-2. Be it resolved, the Cheshire Town Council appropriates the sum of $5,153,749 for the Town of Cheshire Water Pollution Control Fund operating budget for fiscal year 2025-2026. And that the sum of revenues and allocation of Water Pollution Control Fund equity for the fiscal year 2025-2026 Town of Cheshire Water Pollution Control Fund operating budget also be in the amount of $5,153,749. And be it further resolved that the Cheshire Town Council recommends that the Water Pollution Control Authority consider setting the sewer use charge at $485 per year, effective December 1st, 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Jinks. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Jinks, back to you for any discussion on the item.
I don't have a whole lot of words left. But
You're not alone.
the water pollution control budget is, obviously the plant is an expensive asset. It has been increasingly so over the last several years. But obviously, it's one of the more important assets we have in town, of course, for obvious reasons. But I am certainly supporting this budget.
Mr. Walsh.
Can we just, what's the increase in the sewer tax is how much?
So I think it was proposed at $5, and then we recommended an additional 15 to try to balance.
It was increased by $20?
$20 increase. That's correct, Jim, right?
And the reasoning behind that, because I know you mentioned it the other night, and I think, our taxpayers need to understand why, they always seem to complain that Christmas gift comes every year to them.
Yep. Yeah, so, I mean, you're asking the reason for the increase, or?
Yeah,
the
yeah,
timing?
why, normally it goes up $5 or so, but this is a large
Yeah,
increase.
it didn't go up last year at all. Ultimately, that's a decision that the WPCA makes when they set the rate, but the council does, with this motion, put a recommended suggested rate. The budget as proposed included an additional use of their fund balance reserves. That was at a level that we weren't comfortable with. And so in order to balance that, we did make reductions on their expenditure side, the construction line and a few others that we discussed at that council meeting, but also suggested in order to propose a balanced budget that we would have to increase by an additional $15 from what was first proposed in order to not use any fund equity in at least the proposed budget. Because just where that fund balance is getting, we want to make sure we maintain a healthy enough balance for any unforeseen events that happen.
Well, like we've said before, I mean, none of us want to see these increases, but in this case, it's pretty important to make sure that we keep our plant up to grade. We ran into a problem several years back, and it cost us a lot of money, but I think Mr. Milano is doing a great job over there, and I think we need to support this. And yes, I mean, it's going up $20, and you're going to get a Christmas card from the town this year, but I mean, it's something that is pretty important to make sure everything's flowing through the town well.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anything further? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, the adoption of the fiscal year 2025-2026 Community Pool Fund operating budget. Back to you, Mr. Jinks, for the shortest of the three.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution number 042225-3. Be resolved, the Cheshire Town Council appropriates the sum of $1,308,762 for the Town of Cheshire Community Pool Fund operating budget for fiscal year 2025-2026, and that the sum of revenues and transfers from other funds and allocation of community pool fund equity for the fiscal year 2025-2026 Town of Cheshire Community Pool Fund operating budget also be in the amount of $1,308,762.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Ms. Ellard, thank you. Discussion, Mr. Jinks?
Sure. So the pool budget, obviously, we've had some discussion earlier about the need to increase some fees coming from the pool. As everyone I think is painfully aware, the pool continues to be an expensive item in town in terms of maintenance and upkeep. So it's, demanding a bit more in terms of fee revenue, also to kind of help us cover the budget in general. So I'm supportive of this budget. This is an item that, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have to make some decisions as a community, what we can continue to support. The pool is probably one of those things that we're going to have further discussions on, as it is an aging building. The roof is, going to be an issue again soon, and as well as other items with the pool. So, it's something we'll have further discussions on in the future. But I am supportive of this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Anyone else? Mr. Mylone?
Yeah, it was an enlightening, I've seen the budget for the pool over several years, and probably didn't focus on it at the level that we did this year, realizing that we had so many challenges, and this is a deficit issue for the town. So we looked at it more carefully, I looked at it more carefully, and I'm fully supportive as one individual of maintaining the pool in the long term. I think it's a real asset to the community. I think, like the library and like other aspects, some of our parks, et cetera, certain people just enjoy this asset of the town, maybe more than others, but it's very important to them. So I'd like us to be cognizant of the value that it brings to the community. And I would like us as a council, and maybe we've said this before, but I want to just emphasize it again, look at a 10-year plan for the pool. Look at, as a business, looking at the structure and the facilities and the programs, and a way to move it from a deficit into a break even, hopefully for the community, and make those decisions that we need to make to ensure that we can maintain it for the long term, as if it were, any type of facility, a school that needs ongoing maintenance, a condominium that has an association that has fees that make sure they maintain it, so that all of a sudden you're not hit with a big expense. And I know these things are looked at, but I'd like to have us look at it as a council and understand it at that level, and make sure that we put a plan in place together that ensures its long-term operation.
Thank you, Mr. Mylone. Mr. Walsh?
Just one comment. It was suggested to us that perhaps, and I'm not sure if they're doing it or not, because when Sheila mentioned that they're paying $85 for each bucket of chlorine, that was kind of eye-opening when she said it used to be around $8. About buying, group buying with other pools around the state, if there's a way that they can get into that where they can get better pricing on things like that, I would suggest that to Mr. Golick, see if he can look into things like that where we could save a little money. And like Mr. Mylone said, I would love to see, some other ideas in order to make it more of a break-even place, where we can enjoy the pool and not have the town subsidize it so much. I really appreciate what has gone in the last couple of years, where we have started to see a turn in the amount that we're subsidizing, and I like that, but I think we could do more. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Anyone else? Just one quick comment. Mr. Mylone, I'm glad you brought that up, and yes, that is on the forefront. In fact, I spoke to Mr. Kimball today about, but at least in September, if not sooner, that the full council needs to get together again to start talking about buildings and facilities, North Brooksville property that we have, Chapman School, Darcy School, what happens with these buildings, but looking at and maybe investing some planning money into a long-range plan for the pool is absolutely on this council's horizon. So be prepared, more to come, but if not sooner, then definitely sometime in September. With that, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, for those of you who may still be watching at home, I'm going to go back to agenda items, back to the general fund operating budget, with some of the cuts that needed to be made with respect to fireworks, and the December celebration for our volunteers in the town. For those of you in town who want to sponsor that, the town does accept gifts, and if those things happen, it will be because we've received some money. So if those things are important to you and you have the means to provide funds for them to help the town, please, by all means, you are welcome to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Allard. And with that, any last closing comments? Seeing none, I will call for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Thank you, Mr. Veliver. All those in favor, motion passes unanimously. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. This was not easy, but much appreciated. Thank you all. We are adjourned.